Hey guys, tonight we are going to unravel the history of one of the oldest and most magical living things that humans have ever partnered with. We're going to trace the long, slow, and patient story of the sourdough starter. Imagine the warm, comforting smell of a loaf of bread baking, the gentle, rhythmic bubbling of a happy starter in its jar, the incredible feeling of turning simple flour and water into something alive, something that connects you directly to thousands of years of human history. Let's be honest. Given that our first bakers didn't know the difference between friendly yeast and toxic mold, you probably wouldn't survive the trial and error phase of this delicious discovery. But tonight, we're not worried about food poisoning, we're just here to enjoy the story. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's a small click for you, but it makes a huge difference for the channel. And feel free to post your location and local time in the comments. It's always amazing to see where everyone is listening from as we start this journey. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Our story begins not in a modern, stainless steel kitchen, but under the hot, brilliant sun of the ancient world. You are in the Fertile Crescent, perhaps in ancient Egypt, thousands of years ago. You live by the rhythms of the great river Nile. The world is a cycle of flood and sun, of planting and harvest. Your life is tied to the grain, the emmer wheat and the barley that grow in the rich, black earth left behind by the river's annual inundation. And for as long as anyone can remember, bread has been the staff of your life. But the bread you know is a simple, humble thing. You take the hard grains and you grind them, a slow, laborious process, crushing them between two heavy, flat stones until you have a rough, sandy flour. You mix this flour with a little water from the river, kneading it into a stiff paste. You shape this paste into thin, flat discs, and you cook them quickly on a scorching hot stone placed in the embers of your fire. The result is bread, yes, but it is a hard, dense, chewy cracker. It is unleavened. It is filling and it gives you strength for the day's work, but it is a purely functional food, devoid of lightness or delight. One hot afternoon, you are preparing for the evening meal. You mix a pot of crushed grain and water, intending to make a simple porridge. But as you are working, you are distracted. Perhaps a child cries out, needing your attention. Perhaps a neighbor stops by to share a piece of gossip. Perhaps the heat of the day simply overwhelms you, and you leave your work to seek the cool shade of a palm tree. For whatever reason, the pot of gruel is forgotten. You leave it sitting outside your small, mud brick home, under the relentless, baking heat of the Egyptian sun. You don't return to it until the next day. As you approach the clay pot, you notice something is wrong. The surface of the gruel, which should be still and inert, is bubbling. Small, lazy bubbles are rising to the surface and popping, as if the mixture were alive. You lean in closer. A strange smell rises to meet you. It is not the smell of rot or decay, not entirely. It is a sharp, sour, tangy smell, with a faint, fruity aroma like fermenting dates or the beer that the brewers make down by the river. You are suspicious. Your first instinct is that it has spoiled, that it has been corrupted by some unseen spirit in the air. But grain is precious. Every handful of flour is the result of immense labor, of planting, harvesting, threshing, and grinding. You cannot afford to waste it. With a shrug of resignation, you decide to cook the strange, bubbling mixture anyway, perhaps to burn away whatever has taken hold of it. You add more flour to the strange, living paste to thicken it, and you shape it into a rough loaf, just as you have always done. You place it on the hot stone to bake. And then, the miracle happens. As the dough heats up, it begins to rise. It puffs up, growing larger and lighter, something no bread you have ever made has done before. When you take it from the fire, it is not the hard, flat cracker you were expecting. It is a rounded, golden brown loaf, its crust cracked and beautiful. It is lighter in your hand than any bread you have ever held. You break it open, and the inside is not dense and heavy, but soft, airy, and full of a network of beautiful, irregular holes. You take a bite. The flavor is a revelation. It is complex, tangy, and deeply satisfying, with a subtle sourness that makes your mouth water. It is the most delicious thing you have ever tasted. You have, entirely by accident, stumbled upon one of the greatest culinary discoveries in human history. You have harnessed the invisible, magical power of wild fermentation. You have made the world's first sourdough bread. Food historians still argue about the specifics of this discovery. Was it truly a forgotten pot of porridge like yours, or was the leavening power of the yeast-rich foam, or barm, from beer brewing discovered first and then deliberately applied to bread. The ancient Egyptians used the very same hieroglyph for both baker and brewer, showing just how intertwined these two magical arts of fermentation were in their world. But your discovery is not yet complete. The true miracle comes a few days later. You have saved a small lump of the strange, bubbly dough from that first magical batch. You have kept it in a clay pot. Out of curiosity, you feed it, adding a little more flour and water. And you watch in amazement as it comes back to life, bubbling and growing, filling the pot with the same sour, fruity, living aroma. You realize you have not just made a single loaf of bread. You have captured the magic. You have created a living thing, a culture, a starter, that you can keep alive indefinitely, simply by feeding it. As long as you care for this strange, bubbling paste, you will be able to replicate the miracle of light, airy, delicious bread forever. You look at the humble clay pot with a new sense of reverence and awe. It contains not just flour and water, but an invisible, powerful, and life-giving force. It is a gift from the gods, a secret whispered to you by the warm sun and the wild, invisible spirits in the air. It is a responsibility, a sacred trust. You are no longer just a baker, you are a custodian of life, the keeper of an ancient, bubbling magic. You stand before the humble clay pot, your mind filled with a sense of wonder and a little bit of fear. This bubbling, living paste is a mystery, a magical gift. You don't understand how it works, only that it does. You only know that if you care for it, if you feed it, it will in turn give you the gift of light, airy, and delicious bread. But now, let's leave your perspective as the ancient baker for a moment. Let's use the magic of our modern knowledge to zoom in, to shrink ourselves down to a size smaller than a grain of sand, and to go on a quiet, gentle safari into the invisible, bustling world that exists inside your starter. As we descend into the jar, the thick, sticky mixture of flour and water transforms into a vast, starchy landscape. We are floating in a world of massive, suspended particles of protein and carbohydrate, a sweet and nourishing universe. And it is a universe that is teeming with life. The first inhabitants we meet are the wild yeasts. They are everywhere, these tiny, single-celled fungi. They are floating on invisible currents in the warm Egyptian air. They are clinging to the husks of the very grain you ground into flour, and they are even present on the skin of your own hands. They are like tiny, dormant seeds, waiting for the perfect conditions to awaken. And your pot of flour and water is that perfect condition. When one of these wild yeast spores lands in this warm, wet, sugary world, it wakes up and does what all living things do. It begins to eat. It feasts on the simple sugars present in the flour, and as it metabolizes this food, it begins to exhale. But it does not breathe out the same air we do. The waste product of its meal, its tiny burp, is carbon dioxide gas. These are the bubbles you see rising to the surface of your starter. When you later mix this starter into a larger batch of dough, millions of these tiny yeasts get trapped in the sticky, elastic network of gluten. As they continue to exhale their carbon dioxide, they create millions of tiny gas pockets that cause the entire loaf to expand, to rise, to become light and airy. The yeast is the engine of the bread's lift. But the yeast is not alone in this microscopic world. There is another, equally important inhabitant, bacteria. Now, we often think of bacteria as something to be feared, a source of sickness and decay. But the bacteria in your starter are not only friendly, they are essential partners. They are various species of lactobacillus, the very same family of beneficial bacteria that are used to turn milk into yogurt and cheese. These bacteria, just like the yeast, are found everywhere in the environment, and they too are drawn to the feast of sugar you have provided in your pot. They also eat the sugars in the flour, but their waste products are different. They produce acids, primarily lactic acid, which gives yogurt its tangy flavor, and acetic acid, which gives vinegar its sour sharpness. These two acids are the secret to sourdough's unique character. First, they provide the flavor. The complex, tangy, and slightly sour taste of the bread you made is a direct result of these acids produced by the bacteria. Without them, you would have a light but rather plain-tasting loaf. The bacteria provide the soul. Second, and perhaps more importantly, these acids act as a natural preservative. The acids lower the pH of the dough, creating a hostile environment where other, less friendly microbes, like the molds that quickly spoil other foods, simply cannot survive. This is why a loaf of naturally leavened sourdough bread stays fresh for much longer than other breads. The bacteria are the bread's personal bodyguards. What you have cultivated in your simple clay pot is not just a single living thing, but a complex, stable, and beautifully symbiotic ecosystem. The yeast and the bacteria have formed a perfect partnership. The acids produced by the bacteria protect the yeast from competing molds and other microbes. In turn, some byproducts of the yeast's metabolism can provide food for the bacteria. They create a balanced community, a living culture where each partner helps the other to thrive. And this microscopic community is unique to you. The specific strains of wild yeast and bacteria that have populated your starter are a direct reflection of your environment. This concept is what vintners call terroir. It's the idea that the unique qualities of a local environment, the soil, the climate, the air, give a wine its distinctive character. Your sourdough starter has its own terroir. The yeasts floating in the air of your particular village, the bacteria living on the grain from your specific field, even the microbes on your own hands, have all contributed to creating a starter with a flavor and character that is unique in all the world. Microbiologists are still unraveling the full complexity of these relationships, but you, the ancient baker, you learn it all through simple, patient observation. You learn that when the bubbling slows, the starter is hungry, and you must feed it with fresh flour and water. You learn that it is happiest and most active in the warmth, just as it was when it was first born in the sun. You learn that if the sour smell becomes too sharp, it is out of balance, and that by discarding a portion before feeding, you can refresh the culture and restore its gentle, fruity aroma. You look at the bubbling pot with a new and deeper awe. The magic has not been dispelled by this knowledge, it has been magnified. You are not just the keeper of a single magical creature. You are the custodian of an entire, invisible world. You are a shepherd to a microscopic flock of yeast and a farmer to a tiny field of bacteria. You have harnessed not just a force of nature, but a whole living, breathing ecosystem in a jar. And this profound, intimate partnership between human and microbe, begun by accident on a hot afternoon, will form the very foundation of the art of bread making for the next 5,000 years. You stand in the hot, dry air of ancient Egypt, cradling the simple clay pot that holds the world's first sourdough starter. This living, breathing, bubbling magic you have captured feels like a personal secret, a domestic miracle. But secrets, especially ones as useful and as powerful as this, have a way of spreading. We'll leave you now, the accidental baker, and let our consciousness drift forward in time, across the deep blue of the Mediterranean Sea. The landscape of mud brick villages and papyrus reeds dissolves, replaced by the sight of stone-paved roads, magnificent marble temples, and the ceaseless, bustling energy of the greatest empire the world has ever known. You have arrived in ancient Rome. Your journey takes you down a busy city street, perhaps in the shadow of the great Colosseum itself, or in a prosperous town like Pompeii. The air is filled with the sounds of commerce, of rattling carts, and of 100 different voices speaking Latin. You are drawn by a familiar and comforting smell, the warm, toasty, and utterly wonderful aroma of baking bread. You follow the scent to its source, a building known as a pistrinum, a Roman bakery. This is a world away from your simple, domestic hearth in Egypt. Bread making in Rome is a serious, professional industry. You see huge, beehive-shaped brick ovens, their fiery mouths glowing with intense heat. In the center of the workshop, you see the massive stone mills used for grinding grain, turned not by hand, but by a blindfolded donkey or mule, patiently walking in an endless circle. This is baking on an almost industrial scale. The state itself had a vested interest in keeping the city's immense population fed. The policy of providing cheap or free grain and entertainment, the infamous bread and circuses, was essential for maintaining public order. This demand gave rise to a powerful class of professional bakers, who formed their own guilds, or collegia, and took immense pride in their craft. And at the heart of this professional enterprise, you find your old friend, the starter. But here, it is not just a humble pot of bubbling paste. Here, it is a priceless asset, a trade secret, the very soul of the bakery. It is known as the fermentum, or more poetically, the leaven. You watch the master baker, the pister, as he approaches a large earthenware crock that sits in a warm, protected corner of the room. He treats it with a reverence that borders on religious devotion. This is the mother starter, the source of every loaf of bread that comes out of his ovens. It is a living culture, an heirloom that has been in his family for generations, passed down from his father, and from his father's father before him. It carries within its bubbling depths the unique taste of this place, the specific wild yeasts and bacteria that give his bread its signature flavor and texture, a flavor that distinguishes his bakery from all the others in the city. No one is allowed to touch this mother starter except for him. It is guarded more jealously than gold. The daily ritual is a testament to this reverence. In the evening, after the day's baking is done, you watch the pister perform a crucial task. He does not use the precious mother starter for the next day's dough directly. Instead, he takes just a small spoonful of the mother and places it in a much larger bowl. To this, he adds a precise measure of flour and water, creating a large, fresh batch of active leaven. This new leaven will be used for tomorrow's bread, while the original mother remains safe and pure in her crock, her strength preserved. The next morning, long before dawn, the bakery is already a hive of activity. The new, active leaven, now bubbly and fragrant, is mixed with huge quantities of flour, water, and salt in a large kneading trough. You watch as strong, sweating bakers work the massive pile of dough, their movements rhythmic and powerful. They shape the dough into the characteristic Roman loaves, round, and scored with lines on top to create 8 or 9 wedges, making the loaf easy to break and share without a knife. You can see these very loaves, frozen in time, preserved as black, carbonized artifacts in the volcanic ash that buried the city of Pompeii. The baker's pride was immense. In Rome, you can still visit the strange and magnificent tomb of a man named Eurysaces, a former slave who became a fabulously wealthy baker and state contractor. His tomb is one of the most eccentric in the city, decorated with scenes depicting every stage of the bread-making process, from the grinding of the grain to the baking of the loaves in the oven. It is a powerful statement of the status and dignity that could be achieved through the mastery of this ancient art. As you watch a baker use a long wooden peel to slide the pale, scored loaves into the fiery mouth of the oven, you reflect on the journey of the starter. In Egypt, it was a domestic accident, a household magic. Here, in the heart of a bustling, pragmatic empire, it has become a professional tool, a symbol of tradition, quality, and commercial success. But it is still a living thing, it is still a partnership between human and microbe. And it is still an unbroken chain, a living, breathing, bubbling connection that links this noisy Roman bakery all the way back to that first, quiet, sun-drenched discovery on the banks of the Nile. The master baker, having used the day's leaven, now performs the final, crucial ritual. He takes a small lump of the freshly made bread dough and adds it back to his mother starter, feeding her, replenishing her, ensuring her life and the life of his bakery will continue for another day. It is a quiet act of continuity, a daily prayer to the invisible ecosystem that is the source of his livelihood, his identity, and his art. You stand in the noisy, bustling heart of a Roman bakery, a place of commerce, of industry, of pragmatic, large-scale production. The master baker carefully feeds his precious mother starter, a living asset that guarantees the quality and reputation of his business. But empires, no matter how great, are not eternal. We now let the image of Rome, with its stone-paved roads and its powerful legions, begin to crumble. The great imperial order frays at the edges and then collapses from within. The centuries that follow are a time of turmoil and upheaval, an era often called the Dark Ages. Cities shrink, trade routes become dangerous, and much of the practical knowledge of the ancient world is forgotten. In this chaotic new landscape, who will keep the flame of knowledge alive? Who will protect the living, bubbling flame of the sourdough starter? Our journey takes us forward several hundred years, into the heart of early medieval Europe. We leave the noise of the city behind and travel to a quiet, secluded river valley, surrounded by deep forests and green hills. Nestled in this valley, you see a collection of sturdy stone buildings, surrounded by a high wall. You hear the slow, rhythmic tolling of a great bronze bell and the faint, beautiful sound of men's voices joined together in a solemn chant. You have arrived at a monastery. In the wake of Rome's collapse, these secluded communities became the unlikely guardians of civilization. They were islands of order, peace, and learning in a sea of chaos. Guided by the rule of their founding saints, like Saint Benedict, the monks lived a disciplined life of prayer and work, or et labora. They were not just men of God, they were scholars, artists, scientists, and engineers. In their scriptoriums, they painstakingly copied and preserved the great literary and philosophical texts of the ancient world. And in their fields, workshops, and kitchens, they preserved the practical arts of agriculture, of brewing, and of baking. You pass through the monastery gatehouse and enter the quiet, orderly world within the walls. You are led to the bakehouse, the pistrinum of the monastery. The building is made of solid stone, its interior clean and well organized. It is a world away from the dusty, commercial bakery of Rome. Here, the work is done with a quiet, focused, and prayerful discipline. The baker is not a businessman, but a monk, a brother chosen for this vital task. He wears the simple, rough-spun habit of his order. His work is not a job, It is his sacred duty. He is responsible for providing the daily bread for his brothers, the very foundation of their simple, communal diet. The Benedictine rule allotted each monk a generous portion of bread each day, and in a life of fasting and austerity, it was a profound and necessary comfort. And at the heart of this monastic bakery, you see it again. Your old, familiar friend. In a large earthenware crock, kept in a warm spot near the great, domed oven, is the sourdough starter. Here, it is treated with a reverence that transcends its practical value. It is seen as a living gift from God. The mysterious process by which it transforms simple flour and water into light, nourishing bread is seen as a daily miracle, a tangible symbol of God's grace and the mystery of the resurrection. This starter may well be a direct, living descendant of the starters of the Roman world, a fragile, unbroken chain of life carried through the centuries of collapse, protected and nurtured behind these stone walls. The brother baker's work is a form of meditation. You watch as he feeds the starter, his movements slow and deliberate. He kneads the dough for the day's loaves, and you can see that his rhythmic, repetitive motions are a kind of physical prayer. The bread he makes serves many purposes. There is the coarse, dark loaf, often made from a mixture of wheat and rye called maslin, which will form the daily sustenance for the monks themselves. A portion of these loaves will also be given as alms to the poor and hungry who come to the monastery gates for charity. Then there is the finer bread, made from carefully sifted white flour, which will be used for the Eucharist at the altar, or served to important guests and pilgrims seeking shelter for the night. Historians debate the role of the monks in this era. Were they true innovators, actively experimenting with crop rotation, brewing techniques, and baking methods? Or were they primarily meticulous custodians of Roman knowledge, carefully preserving the old ways without significant change? Looking at the quiet, focused work of the brother baker, you sense it is a mixture of both, a deep respect for the ancient tradition, combined with a patient, daily quest for perfection in the service of God. You see in this quiet, sacred space a new spiritual dimension to the art of baking. The starter itself is a metaphor for faith, a small, humble thing that, with patient care and feeding, can grow and give life to the entire community. The rising of the dough is a symbol of hope and rebirth. The final, baked loaf is a testament to the transformative power of both physical and spiritual nourishment. The bell tolls again, calling the monks to prayer. The brother baker covers his dough with a linen cloth, wipes his hands, and makes the sign of the cross before leaving the bakehouse. But before he goes, he performs the final, crucial ritual. He takes a small piece of the dough he has just made and returns it to the mother starter, folding it in gently. He is feeding the culture, ensuring its life, its strength, and its continuity for the next day, and the day after that, and for the generations of monks to come. In an age of darkness and decay, you have found the light, not just in the monastery's library, but here, in its warm, quiet bakehouse, where a simple monk and his ancient, living starter are keeping one of the world's most important traditions alive. You stand in the quiet, holy bakehouse of a medieval monastery. Here, sheltered behind thick stone walls, the living culture in your starter has been protected, nurtured, and passed down through centuries of chaos. It is a symbol of preservation, of order, and of quiet, patient faith. But the world outside these walls is beginning to wake up. The Renaissance is blooming, trade routes are reopening, and a new age of discovery is dawning. Humanity is becoming restless, eager to explore the blank spaces on the map. And for your starter to join this new adventure, it must learn to travel. Our journey takes us forward in time, into the 16th or 17th century. The serene, cloistered world of the monastery dissolves, replaced by the noisy, chaotic, and exciting energy of a great European seaport. You are on the docks of a city like Lisbon or Plymouth. The air is thick with the smell of salt, tar, and fish, and the strange, enticing aromas of exotic spices being unloaded from a newly returned vessel. The sky above is a tangled forest of tall masts and rigging. Sailors from a dozen different nations shout to one another in a cacophony of languages. Great galleons and nimble caravels are being loaded with provisions for voyages that will last not for days or weeks, but for months, and sometimes even years. You are a ship's cook, or perhaps a simple sailor, preparing to embark on one of these grand, perilous journeys. You know what lies ahead, an endless expanse of ocean and a diet of almost unimaginable monotony. The staple food of the sailor is salted beef, so hard it must be soaked for hours before it can be chewed, and hardtack. Hardtack is a simple, unleavened biscuit made of flour, water, and salt, baked multiple times until it is as hard and as durable as a piece of wood. It is famously infested with weevils, but it does not spoil, and it will keep a man alive, if not happy. The thought of months with nothing but salt meat and weevily biscuits is a grim one. The ability to bake fresh bread at sea would be more than a luxury, it would be a miracle, a vital boost to both nutrition and morale. But how do you take your living, bubbling sourdough starter on such a journey? A wet, active starter in a clay pot would spoil or spill in the rough conditions of a ship. It needs a new form. And so, you learn an ancient and ingenious technique for making your starter portable. You take a portion of your healthy, active starter, the one that smells sweet and sour and is full of life. You spread it out in a thin, even layer on a clean wooden board or a piece of linen cloth. Then, you leave it in a warm, dry place, perhaps on a sunny windowsill, or by the gentle heat of a dying fire. Over the course of a day or two, the water evaporates. The bubbling ceases. The living, active paste dries into a brittle, flaky, and completely inert substance. It looks like a thin, pale cracker. The magic seems to have gone, but you know that the magic is not gone, it is merely sleeping. On a microscopic level, the wild yeasts and the friendly lactobacilli that form the starter's living ecosystem have entered a state of suspended animation. Like a seed waiting for the spring rain, they have gone dormant, their life processes slowed to a near standstill, waiting patiently to be reawakened. You break the brittle sheet of dried starter into pieces and place them in a small cloth bag, which you tie securely. This is the sailor's secret weapon. It is lightweight, it takes up almost no space, and it is completely non-perishable. It is a promise of fresh bread, a dormant piece of home that you can carry with you to the far corners of the earth. You pack this precious bag into your small sea chest, alongside your spare shirt, your knife, and perhaps a small Bible. Weeks later, you are at sea. The world has become an endless, shifting landscape of gray water and gray sky. The diet is as grim as you feared. The hardtack is a chore to eat, and the salted meat is a stringy, joyless source of sustenance. The crew is weary, and the mood is glum. The ship's cook decides that it is time for a miracle. From his stores, he retrieves the small cloth bag containing the dried starter. He takes out a few of the hard, flaky pieces and crumbles them into a wooden bowl. He adds a splash of lukewarm water from his ration, and a small spoonful of flour, a quick, sugary meal to welcome the microbes back to the world of the living. He then places the bowl in a warm, sheltered spot near the galley fire, a dangerous place on a wooden ship, but the only place with enough consistent warmth. This galley is a greasy, smoky place, and you might recall the old naval tradition of the slush fund. The cook would collect the foul, leftover fat, or slush, from boiling the salt meat and was allowed to sell it in port for his own profit. For a day, nothing happens. The mixture is just a lifeless paste. But then, on the second day, you see a single, tiny bubble appear on the surface. And then another. Slowly, the dormant ecosystem awakens. The yeasts and bacteria rehydrate and begin to feed and multiply. By the end of the day, the bowl is once again filled with a familiar, gentle, bubbling life. Your starter has crossed the ocean and has come back to life. The cook carefully nurtures this reawakened culture, feeding it with more flour and water until it is strong and active. Then, he bakes. In the cramped, hot, and constantly rocking galley, he kneads a dough and bakes a few rough loaves in his small oven. The smell that wafts out onto the deck of the ship is almost shocking in this world of salt and sea. It is the warm, comforting, and almost forgotten smell of baking bread. You are given a piece of this bread, and as you bite into its soft, airy, tangy crumb, the taste is a powerful connection to the land you left behind. It is a reminder of home, of bakeries, of fields of wheat. You look out at the endless, empty horizon. You have just witnessed the incredible resilience of this living culture you first discovered in an Egyptian pot. It has learned to travel. It has learned to sleep and to reawaken. It has become a sailor's faithful companion, a portable piece of civilization, ready to be carried to the shores of a new world. You stand on the deck of a great sailing ship, a piece of fresh, tangy bread in your hand, a taste of home in the middle of a vast and empty ocean. The living culture you carry, now dried and dormant, has learned to travel. It has crossed the sea, a faithful companion that can be awakened with a little warmth and care. This portable magic, this promise of bread, lands with the sailors and colonists on the shores of a new world, ready to begin a new chapter in its long, strange history. Our journey continues. We leave the age of sail behind, and the narrative moves forward in time, pushing across the new continent. We travel to the late 19th century, an age of industry, expansion, and frenzied hope. The landscape changes once more. The green fields and rolling hills are gone, replaced by towering, snow-capped mountains, dense pine forests, and icy, fast-flowing rivers. You are in the rugged, unforgiving wilderness of the North American frontier, perhaps in the Yukon or the mountains of California. You are here for one reason: gold. You are now a prospector, a gold miner, your day's a cycle of back-breaking, hope-fueled labor. You spend hours standing in a freezing stream, patiently sifting through sand and gravel with your gold pan. Or you are digging into the hard, frozen earth, the permafrost, with a pickaxe, searching for the elusive glitter of a hidden vein. The work is hard, the rewards are few, and the solitude is immense. In this world, your diet is as harsh and as simple as the landscape itself: beans, bacon, coffee, and whatever bread you can make. And for that, you depend entirely on your most precious possession. It is not your pickaxe, nor your gold pan, nor even the small pouch of gold dust you may have accumulated. Your most important possession is a sturdy earthenware crock, which you guard with your life. Inside this crock lives your sourdough starter. Here on the frontier, the starter is not a hobby, nor a connection to the past. It is a fundamental tool for survival. The men who came here, who endured the brutal winters and the crushing loneliness, became so famously associated with this bubbling pot of life that they earned a nickname, a badge of honor for a seasoned veteran of the North. They were called sourdoughs. The greatest challenge in this new environment is the cold. The wild yeasts and bacteria that make up the living ecosystem in your starter are hardy, but they are not immortal. If the starter is allowed to freeze solid, the delicate microbes will die, and your source of leavening will be gone, a disaster that could mean the difference between life and death in the middle of a long, isolated winter. And so, you learn a new and incredibly intimate way of caring for your living culture. The days are spent in hard labor, but as the sun sets and the temperature plummets far below freezing, you perform a nightly ritual. You bring your precious crock in from the cold. You wrap it carefully in a piece of blanket or a spare bit of flannel. And then, you take it to bed with you. You curl up in your rough bedroll or under your pile of furs, and you tuck the crock in beside you, your own body heat providing the gentle, steady warmth that the microscopic life inside needs to survive the frozen night. The starter becomes your living hot water bottle, a gently burbling companion in the vast, silent, and freezing wilderness. It is a partnership of mutual survival. Your warmth keeps it alive, and its life, in turn, keeps you fed. In the morning, you awaken in the frigid air of your small log cabin. The first thing you do is check on your starter. It is still alive, still bubbling slowly, smelling of that familiar, sharp, yeasty tang. You take a portion of the bubbly starter and mix it with flour and water to create a batter for your breakfast, sourdough flapjacks. You cook them in a heavy, cast iron skillet over your campfire, the hiss of the batter hitting the hot grease a welcome sound in the morning quiet. They are not light and delicate, but they are hot, filling, and nourishing, the perfect fuel for a long day of digging and panning. After your meal, you perform the ancient ritual. You feed your starter, adding a little more flour and water to the crock to replenish what you have used. You then place the crock in the warmest spot you can find, perhaps on a rock near your campfire, to let the culture bubble and grow throughout the day, ready for the evening's meal of biscuits or a rough loaf of bread. The old-timers, the veteran sourdoughs, would tell tall tales about their starters. There were stories of men who fell through the ice into a frozen river and, given the choice, saved their crock of starter before they saved their mining partner. There were stories of starters that were 100 years old, originally brought over from the old country, passed down from one generation of prospectors to the next, a living, bubbling heirloom carrying the spirit of the frontier itself. Historians may debate the romanticism of these stories, but they speak to a fundamental truth. In the immense, crushing loneliness of a prospector's life, the starter became more than just a leavening agent. It was a living thing in a world that often felt dead and frozen. It was a companion. It required care, it responded to attention, it had its own moods and rhythms. Its gentle bubbling was a sound of life, a confirmation that you were not entirely alone. You are curled up now in your bedroll, the fire burned down to glowing embers. Outside, the northern lights might be dancing in the frozen sky, and the only sound is the howl of a distant wolf. It is a vast and lonely world. But tucked in beside you, a small, warm weight against your body, is your crock of sourdough starter, quietly, patiently, and faithfully, bubbling with life. You have seen how this ancient culture has adapted once more, becoming a rugged partner in survival, a symbol of life and perseverance in the most unforgiving of landscapes. You are curled up in your rough bedroll in a frozen cabin, the only warmth coming from your own body and the precious, living crock of sourdough starter tucked in beside you. This hearty, bubbling companion has become a symbol of survival on the unforgiving northern frontier. But frontiers, by their nature, are temporary. The gold rushes, for all their frenzy, eventually fade. The prospectors, the original sourdoughs, pack up their tools and their precious starters and begin to drift back towards civilization. Our journey takes us south now, leaving the icy rivers and pine forests of the Klondike behind. We travel down the coast to a city that was itself born of a gold rush, a chaotic and vibrant boomtown on the edge of the Pacific Ocean. You arrive in San Francisco in the latter half of the 19th century. The air here is not cold and dry, but cool, damp, and heavy with the scent of the sea. The defining feature of this city is not the snow, but the fog, a thick, white blanket that rolls in from the ocean, shrouding the city's famous steep hills in a mysterious, ghostly embrace. The sourdoughs who come down from the mountains bring their starters with them. In this new, bustling city, they transition from miners to merchants, opening bakeries to feed the thousands of new arrivals. Sourdough bread, the food of the frontier, quickly becomes a staple of San Francisco. Famous bakeries are established, like the Bodine Bakery, founded in 1849, which proudly claims to have kept its original mother dough alive ever since, a continuous, living link back to the city's very beginning. But the bakers begin to notice something strange, something wonderful. The bread they bake here in San Francisco, using the very same starters they had nurtured in the mining camps of the Sierra Nevada, tastes different. It is still sourdough, but the flavor is more complex, more pronounced. It has a sharper, tangier, more acidic bite than any bread they have made before. For over a century, the reason for this unique flavor remained a delicious mystery. Bakers would say it was the magic of the San Francisco air, a special quality carried in on the fog. They weren't entirely wrong. You are now standing inside one of these historic bakeries. The air is warm and smells incredible. You watch the bakers, masters of their craft, as they work with their bubbly, active starter. They will tell you that the secret is in the starter, in the mother dough that they have so carefully maintained. But the true secret, the ingredient that makes their bread world famous, is an invisible one, a microscopic inhabitant that has made its home in their starters, a creature that thrives in the city's unique climate. For decades, scientists were puzzled. They knew that all sourdough starters were a symbiotic culture of yeast and bacteria. But what made San Francisco so special? Finally, in the 1970s, a team of microbiologists at the University of California, Davis, solved the mystery. They managed to isolate and identify the specific microbe responsible for that signature tangy flavor. It was a previously unknown species of lactic acid bacteria. In honor of the city where it was discovered and where it reigns supreme, they named it Lactobacillus sanfrancisensis. This unique bacterium had formed a perfect partnership with a specific strain of wild yeast, Candida malari, that was also unusually tolerant of cold temperatures. The cool, foggy climate of the San Francisco Bay Area, which rarely gets very hot or very cold, creates the perfect environment for this microbial power couple to thrive. The yeast does its job, producing the carbon dioxide that makes the bread rise beautifully. But the Lactobacillus sanfrancisensis produces high levels of both lactic acid and, crucially, acetic acid, the acid that gives vinegar its sharp taste. It is this high concentration of acetic acid that gives San Francisco sourdough its famous, assertive, and mouth-puckering tang. This is the ultimate expression of the concept of terroir that we first encountered back in ancient Egypt. Just as the grapes for a fine wine absorb the character of the soil and the climate they are grown in, a sourdough starter absorbs the microbial character of its environment. The starter you have been following on its long journey has adapted once again. It has breathed in the foggy, salty air of the San Francisco Bay, and in doing so, it has become something entirely new. A unique living culture that could not exist anywhere else in the world. Food historians still debate the more subtle influences. Is there such a thing as the baker's thumb? Does the unique microbiome present on a baker's own hands, through years of kneading and handling the dough, contribute its own signature to the starter's flavor profile? It is a romantic idea, a testament to the intimate partnership between the baker and their living dough. You are handed a thick slice of the bread, fresh from the oven. The crust is a deep, golden brown, crackling and blistered. The inside, the crumb, is soft, chewy, and full of beautiful, irregular holes. You take a bite. The flavor is extraordinary. It is rich, complex, and possessed of that famous, sharp, clean sourness that fills your senses. It is the taste of a specific time and a specific place. It is the taste of the gold rush, the taste of the frontier, and the taste of the cool Pacific fog. You look out the bakery window at the mist rolling in over the hills, a great, white, living thing. You now understand the secret ingredient. It is not magic. It is a beautiful accident of microbiology, a perfect convergence of human history, patient craft, and the invisible life carried on the cool, damp sea breeze. You have witnessed the starter reach its most famous and specialized form, a living, breathing, and delicious embodiment of the city it calls home. You are standing in a San Francisco bakery, the cool, foggy air outside a perfect partner to the warm, tangy loaf of bread in your hand. This is the sourdough starter at its most famous, its most specialized, its most celebrated. Here, in this city by the bay, the ancient art of natural leavening has reached a kind of pinnacle, a perfect expression of its environment. But even as this tradition is being perfected, a new and powerful force is rising in the world, a force that will threaten to make your ancient, living starter obsolete. A force born not from accident and tradition, but from science and industry. Our journey takes us forward now, into the late 19th and early 20th centuries. This is the great age of progress, of steam engines, of factories, of the belief that science could solve any problem and improve any process. The world is getting faster. Life is accelerating. And in this new, impatient world, the slow, patient, and sometimes unpredictable art of nurturing a sourdough starter is beginning to look like a relic of a bygone era. Let's be honest, your living starter, for all its magic, can be a demanding companion. It is a living thing, and like all living things, it is temperamental. It needs to be fed every day. It is sensitive to changes in temperature. It can become sluggish and slow, or too acidic and sour. A baker needs years of experience, a kind of sixth sense, to read the moods of their starter and achieve consistent results. And above all, it is slow. The wild yeasts work at their own pace, and the long, slow fermentation required to develop that complex flavor can take the better part of a day. In a world that is beginning to value speed and efficiency above all else, these qualities are starting to be seen not as virtues, but as flaws. Meanwhile, in the laboratories of Europe, a scientific revolution is underway. The great French scientist Louis Pasteur, through his groundbreaking work on fermentation, has demystified the process. He has shown the world that the magic of brewing and baking is not magic at all. It is the work of tiny, living microorganisms. For the first time, people understand that yeast is a single-celled fungus responsible for leavening. And once you understand something, you can begin to control it. Scientists soon learn how to isolate specific, powerful strains of yeast. They discover that one particular species, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, the same yeast used to brew beer, is an incredibly efficient and reliable leavener. The next step is to mass produce it. They develop methods to grow these pure strains of yeast on an industrial scale, feeding them on huge vats of nutrient-rich molasses. This living cream of yeast could then be skimmed off, the moisture pressed out, and formed into convenient little blocks or cakes. Later, techniques were developed to dry it into the small, shelf-stable granules we know today. And with that, commercial baker's yeast is born. It arrives on the market as a kind of miracle product. It is convenient, it is cheap, and above all, it is predictable. A baker no longer needs to be a master craftsman with an intuitive feel for his living starter. He no longer needs to feed a bubbling crock day after day. He simply needs to open a packet. The results are the same, every single time. And it is fast. Incredibly fast. A loaf of bread that would have taken all day to rise using a traditional sourdough starter could now be made from start to finish in just a few short hours. For commercial bakeries looking to produce hundreds or thousands of loaves a day, this is a revolutionary advantage. The new yeast also perfectly suited a new ideal of bread that was becoming popular. New milling technologies could now produce a fine, pure white flour, stripped of its bran and germ. And new oven technologies, like the Vienna process which used steam injection, could create loaves with a light, airy texture and a thin, crisp crust. This new, fast-rising commercial yeast was the perfect engine for producing this new kind of soft, white, uniform bread. Food historians and cultural critics still debate the impact of this change. Was it a great democratic achievement, a scientific triumph that made cheap, reliable, and convenient bread accessible to the masses? Or was it a tragic loss, an erosion of nutritional value, flavor diversity, and traditional knowledge in the relentless pursuit of efficiency and profit. From your perspective as the timeless custodian of your starter, the change is heartbreaking. You watch as, over the course of a few decades, the ancient tradition begins to disappear. In bakeries and in homes, the faithful, bubbling sourdough crock is retired. It is placed at the back of a cupboard, forgotten, and eventually thrown away. Its living, complex ecosystem, with its unique terroir and its history stretching back thousands of years, is replaced by a small paper packet of identical, factory-produced, granulated yeast. Bread becomes standardized. It becomes faster, wider, softer, and for the first time in its long history, it becomes bland. The complex, tangy, and soulful flavor that came from the slow work of the lactobacilli is gone, sacrificed for speed and convenience. You have watched your starter survive the fall of empires, cross the world's oceans, and endure the frozen hardships of the frontier. But now, it faces its greatest challenge yet, the quiet, unassuming, and relentless power of scientific progress and industrial convenience. It seems as though the long, slow, magical journey that began by accident in a sun-drenched Egyptian pot is finally coming to an end. The magic has been explained, tamed, and put in a packet. Your starter is not extinct, not yet. But it has gone into a deep hibernation, its ancient, bubbling life carried on only in a few dedicated artisanal bakeries, and in the quiet kitchens of a handful of families who, for reasons of tradition or taste, simply refuse to let the magic die. The world outside has fallen in love with speed and convenience. The soft, uniform, and slightly bland white loaf, made in a few short hours with a packet of commercial yeast, has become the new king. The ancient, slow, and temperamental art of sourdough has been pushed to the margins, a relic of a bygone era. Your bubbling crock, which was once the heart of the Roman bakery and the most precious possession of the Klondike prospector, now seems destined to be forgotten, a casualty of progress. But the story of your starter is not over. It has not died. It has simply gone home. In the quiet corners of the world, far from the bustling commercial bakeries and the new, modern supermarkets, the tradition is kept alive. It survives not as a business, but as a beloved family member. We leave the grand sweep of history for a moment and zoom in on a more intimate scene. You are in a warm, quiet kitchen, perhaps in a rural farmhouse in the European countryside, or in the home of an immigrant family in a bustling American city, sometime in the middle of the 20th century. And you are being passed a sacred trust. From the hands of a grandmother or a great-aunt, you are given a simple glass jar. Inside is a small amount of a familiar, pale, bubbling paste. This is not just any starter, this is the starter. It is the living, breathing legacy of your family. It might even have a name, Bess, or Carl, or the old one, a name given to it generations ago. With the jar comes the oral tradition, the knowledge passed down not in books, but in stories and shared actions. You are shown how to feed it, how to know when it is happy by its sweet, fruity smell, how to read its bubbles like a language. You are taught the feel of the dough it makes, a tactile knowledge that can only be learned by doing. This is the age of the heirloom starter. While the rest of the world embraced the convenience of the factory, these families became the quiet custodians of the living history. They kept their starters alive, not for commercial reasons, but for the sake of tradition, for the superior flavor of the bread, and for the deep, familial connection it represented. You hear the stories associated with your new charge. This starter, your grandmother tells you, was brought over from the old country by her own grandmother, carried across the ocean in a precious crock. It survived a long sea voyage, a new climate, and decades of change. It has been a silent witness to every birth, death, and celebration in your family's history. You learn of other, similar stories. Of pioneers traveling west across the great American plains on the Oregon Trail in the 19th century, their sourdough starters among their most vital provisions. A piece of their old home in Ohio or Missouri could be kept alive and brought with them to their new home in Oregon, a tangible, edible link to the life they had left behind. These family starters often come with their own creation myths. A family in Italy might claim their starter is descended from the very same culture used by the bakers of ancient Pompeii. A family in France might whisper that their levain was a gift from a famous Parisian baker. Folklorists and food historians might debate the literal truth of these claims. Over a century, a starter's microbial makeup will inevitably shift and adapt to its new environment, picking up local yeasts and bacteria. So, is a 150-year-old starter truly the same culture that crossed the plains in a covered wagon? Scientifically, perhaps not. But its story, its lineage, its unbroken chain of care, that is what makes it a genuine heirloom. The starter is not just a collection of microbes, it is the vessel for the family's history and its identity. The ritual of caring for this living legacy becomes a profound act of connection. Once a week, or perhaps every day, you take the jar from its quiet spot. You discard a portion, perhaps giving it to a neighbor who wants to start their own tradition, ensuring the culture spreads and survives, like a cutting from a precious plant. Then you perform the ancient rite of feeding. As you stir in the fresh flour and water, you are not just performing a chore. You are continuing a conversation that stretches back through time. Your hands are performing the same gentle, patient motions as the hands of your great-grandmother, and her mother before her. You are feeding not just a culture of yeast and bacteria, but the very memory of your ancestors. In a world that is becoming increasingly disposable, a world of fast food and throwaway goods, the heirloom starter is a radical and beautiful anomaly. It is a living thing that asks for your patience and your care. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be mass-produced. Its character is a direct reflection of the attention it is given. To keep an heirloom starter alive is to commit to a slow, gentle, and rewarding partnership. You place the freshly fed starter back in its warm spot on the kitchen counter. A few hours later, you see it begin to bubble, a quiet, happy sigh of contentment. You have seen how the starter, pushed into near extinction by the march of industrial progress, found refuge in the most powerful institution of all, the family. It is safe here. It is loved. It is alive, a silent, bubbling storyteller, quietly biding its time in the kitchens of the world, waiting for the day when its slow, ancient magic would be rediscovered. You are in a quiet, mid-century kitchen, the custodian of a living, bubbling heirloom. Your family's sourdough starter, kept safe through generations of turmoil and change, is a quiet testament to the resilience of tradition. While the world outside embraced the speed and uniformity of the factory, your starter has been sleeping, waiting patiently in the quiet corners of the world, its ancient magic known only to a faithful few. But nothing, not even a tradition that is thousands of years old, sleeps forever. Our journey now takes its final step, moving from the recent past into our own time, the late 20th and early 21st centuries. A subtle shift begins to occur in the wider culture. People begin to grow weary of the soft, bland, industrial white loaf. A new craving emerges, a desire for food that is more authentic, more natural, food with a story. A new generation of artisan bakers arises, studying old European techniques and opening small bakeries that reintroduce the public to the complex, tangy, and deeply satisfying flavors of naturally leavened bread. The internet, too, plays a crucial role. The once guarded secrets of sourdough baking are now democratized. A person in a small apartment can watch a video and learn the techniques that were once the domain of master bakers, passed down through years of apprenticeship. The slow, gentle revival of sourdough is happening. But then, in the early 2020s, the world suddenly and dramatically changes. A global pandemic forces humanity into a state of lockdown. People are confined to their homes, their normal routines shattered. They are filled with anxiety and uncertainty, and they have an abundance of one thing they never had before: time. And in this strange new reality of quiet, housebound time, millions of people around the world, as if guided by a collective instinct, turn to the most ancient of comforts. They begin to bake bread. And this is where our story comes full circle. You are no longer just an observer. You are a participant. In your own modern kitchen, you decide to try it for yourself. You will not inherit a starter. You will create one. You will recreate the ancient, accidental magic of the Egyptians. You take a simple glass jar. You mix together two simple ingredients, flour and water. You cover it with a cloth and you leave it on your counter. For a day, nothing happens. For 2 days, nothing happens. You look at the inert, lifeless paste and you feel a sense of doubt. But on the 3rd or 4th day, you see it. A single, tiny bubble appears on the surface. And then another. You lean in and catch a faint, strange, sour smell. It is alive. You have done it. You have captured the wild, invisible yeast and bacteria from the air in your own home, from the flour in your own pantry. You have created life. You become a modern custodian of this ancient tradition. You feed your new starter every day. You give it a name. You watch it grow strong and bubbly, and you feel a deep sense of connection to it. You are participating in the same ritual as the Roman pister, the medieval monk, and the Klondike prospector. But unlike them, you can share your journey with a new, global community. You post pictures of your starter's progress, you ask for advice on baking forums, You share in the collective triumphs and frustrations of thousands of other new bakers who are all on the same journey as you. There are now even starter hotels where you can board your living culture while you go on vacation, a quirky and touching testament to the deep attachment we form with our bubbling companions. After a week or two, your starter is strong enough. You decide to bake your first loaf. You mix the flour, the water, the salt, and your precious, living leaven. You feel the dough in your hands, a soft, supple, living thing. You learn the patient rhythm of stretching and folding. You let it rest, and you watch in amazement as it slowly, beautifully, rises. Finally, you bake it. Your home fills with the most incredible smell, the warm, comforting, and intoxicating aroma of baking bread. When you take the loaf from the oven, it is a masterpiece. Its crust is a deep, burnished brown, covered in beautiful cracks and blisters. As it cools, you can hear it sing, a tiny, crackling sound as the crust contracts. You cut the first slice. The inside is a beautiful, creamy web of irregular holes, the testament to the slow, happy work of your wild yeast. You take a bite. The flavor is complex, tangy, and delicious. And it is a flavor that you, and the invisible life in your home, created together. Sociologists will debate whether this sourdough revival was a temporary fad born of circumstance, or if it represents a more permanent shift in our relationship with food. But for you, it feels profound. You look at the loaf of bread you have just made. You have followed this living culture from its accidental birth on the banks of the Nile, through the great empires and dark ages, across oceans and frozen frontiers, through its near extinction at the hands of industry, and through its quiet preservation in the heart of the family. And now, at the end of its long journey, it has found a new home, right here, in your own kitchen. The starter is not just alive, it is thriving, more widespread and more loved than perhaps ever before. The ancient magic is yours now. The journey is complete. You have unraveled the long, slow, and gentle history of this most remarkable of human creations. The story of the starter is a story of patience, of resilience, of the beautiful and complex partnership between our own human ingenuity and the invisible, magical world of microbes. It is a story of how a simple thing, a bubbling pot of flour and water, can become a living link to our shared past, a comforting, nourishing, and tangible piece of history. Now, with the story told, let the feeling of warmth and contentment fill your mind. Let the memory of that beautiful, fresh-baked loaf be a final, comforting thought. The work is all done. The bread has risen, and all that is left to do is rest. Allow yourself to sink deeply into the softness of your bed, to feel the gentle weight of your blankets, and to drift away into a peaceful, nourishing, and well-earned sleep.
Dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh. Thì chớp nhán nhán được rồi. cái máy là quay gỡ cho anh Thịnh.
Quay nó có lỗ đâu, không quay không có lỗ. Máy xịn kìa, chứ máy này quay đâu.
Thì chớp chớp nhán nhán được rồi. dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh.
Quay nó có đỏ đâu, không quay nó không có đỏ. Má xịn kìa chứ nói này quay đâu.
Thì chớp chớp nhán nhán